Apparently, the future isn't electric. It's just watching grown adults panic while a car that cost more than college refuses to charge. And if you think that's the dumbest part, trust me, the real chaos hasn't even started. 1. A perfectly calm suburban parking lot erupted into tragedy-level chaos the moment one driver decided his EV could totally reach a charger, even though the cable was visibly shorter than a toddler's attention span, leading to a scene where the man parked diagonally across two spaces, opened every door for no reason, and began stretching the charging cable like he was auditioning for an Olympic resistance band competition. He then tried rotating the car, swiveling the charger handle, and even lifting the back bumper like he believed the laws of physics were polite suggestions, all while bystanders watched a grown adult lose a turf war with an inanimate cord. And after 20 minutes of public self-humiliation, he finally admitted defeat by pushing the car an inch at a time to gain cable slack, proving the future of transportation isn't sleek innovation, but watching humans argue with infrastructure designed to help them. 2. A hopeful new EV owner marched into a charging station with the confidence of someone who thought the universe owed him fast charging, only to plug into a level 1 outlet and then loudly complain that his range was increasing by approximately 1 mile per presidency, insisting the station was broken because this should be faster, like plugging in a phone, as though 4,000 pounds of battery-powered metal should behave like a Black Friday discounted iPhone. And he proceeded to pace in circles, blaming the electric grid, his dealership, and eventually Biden's mystical electricity policies, while refusing to believe he was essentially sipping electrons through a cocktail straw. And after 2 hours of furious waiting, he stormed off, swearing the entire EV industry was a scam, unaware that he had chosen the slowest possible charger and then treated it like a personal betrayal. 3. A panicked driver created a miniature traffic apocalypse when their EV shut down at 40% because the touchscreen insisted it was too cold to accept charging, prompting the owner to attempt warming the battery by cranking the cabin heat to tropical rainforest levels, parking directly in front of the charger like it was a tanning booth, and even wrapping the charging port with a winter scarf in what looked like an emotional support ritual rather than a technical solution. And by the time help arrived, the driver had transitioned through all 5 stages of grief, while repeatedly tapping the frozen touchscreen as though anger could generate voltage, ultimately learning the hard way that batteries don't care about optimism, they care about temperature. And the only thing thawed during this meltdown was the driver's belief that EV ownership made them cooler than everyone else. 4. A self-proclaimed tech-savvy commuter triggered a slow-motion disaster when he confidently reversed toward a charger using only the rear camera, refusing to turn his head like a normal human, which resulted in him backing directly into the charging pedestal with the grace of a falling refrigerator, knocking the station sideways while still attempting to plug in as if the equipment had simply chosen a more relaxed position. And after several failed attempts, he stepped back, looked at the mangled post, and declared it poorly designed, conveniently ignoring that he had rammed it like a bull attacking a folding chair. And by the time security arrived, the man was already telling passersby that the charger jumped at him, proving that even in the future, the default American setting remains blaming the furniture. 5. A driver with unwavering faith in Bluetooth energy auras decided he could improve charging speed by holding his phone near the charging port to help the connection, while explaining to a crowd of increasingly horrified onlookers that all wireless things talk to each other. And after 20 minutes of this digital seance, he grew frustrated at the lack of progress and shoved the phone inside the port flap for direct syncing, which ended exactly how physics predicted. The charger refused to start, the phone became a very expensive wedge, and the driver claimed sabotage, tweeting angrily at 3 unrelated tech companies while a mechanic later retrieved the phone using pliers and a prayer, marking yet another moment in history where technology didn't fail. It simply disagreed with delusion. 6. A family road trip went full Greek tragedy when one parent insisted the onboard GPS absolutely knew where the next charger was, even though the map had been offline for 2 hours screaming for Wi-Fi like an abandoned smart fridge. And this unwavering optimism led them 27 miles into rural nothingness, where the only charging option was a single outlet behind a shuttered bait shop guarded by a rooster with boundary issues, forcing the family to sit for 7 hours collecting one sad little mile every 20 minutes while the kids played Count the Abandoned Tractors. And by the time they finally limped back to civilization, the parent blamed Biggie Fee for not wanting people to travel, proving there's a special American tradition of trusting technology until it fails and then accusing it of treason. 7. A driver attempting to hyper-optimize their charging session created a spectacle worthy of a nature documentary by repeatedly unplugging and replugging the cable every 30 seconds, claiming they were resetting the electrons, in a ritual that resembled coaxing a stubborn cat into a carrier. And after the third cycle, the station locked itself out to prevent tampering, causing the driver to accuse it of gaslighting, as though the machinery had emotional motives, and they proceeded to give a dramatic speech about consumer rights to a crowd of people who just wanted to get home before midnight, all while the charger's display calmly showed a message that basically translated to, "Please stop touching me," which might be the first time a piece of public infrastructure begged for personal space. 8. A corporate employee on a business trip discovered the hotel's charging amenity was just an orange extension cord dangling from a second-floor window. But instead of recognizing the obvious scam, the guest attempted to charge anyway, resulting in the cord popping out of the outlet, the window slamming shut, and the hotel manager announcing that the cord was complimentary but not guaranteed to function, essentially describing it like free mints in the lobby. And the guest, too exhausted to argue, ended up dragging their EV to a nearby gas station to mooch electricity from an outdoor outlet, finally discovering it powered only a decorative water fountain, proving that hotels may have embraced the future, but only with the enthusiasm of someone taping a solar panel to a toaster. 9. A delivery app driver learned the hard way that speed and charging etiquette are mortal enemies when he parked sideways across 4 chargers for better cable access, then sprinted inside a grocery store to pick up an order while leaving his car plugged in like a toddler left in charge of a fire hose. And upon returning, he discovered an entire crowd had gathered, not to confront him, but to take photos of this automotive crime scene, labeling him online as the EV lane menace. And he attempted to explain his behavior by insisting the spots weren't clearly labeled, even though they were painted bright green with giant lightning bolts, proving that the Venn diagram of rushing and reasoning remains 2 circles living separate, incompatible lives. 10. A well-meaning but catastrophically overconfident dad tried to help his adult child charge their EV by applying strategies learned from decades of dealing with lawnmowers, which resulted in him tapping the charging handle like a stalled carburetor, wiping the nozzle with a shop rag, and even blowing into the connector as if it were a malfunctioning Nintendo cartridge. And when none of this revived the charger, he declared the entire station not primed, a term that made the surrounding EV owners stare at him like he had just spoken ancient Sumerian. And after 10 minutes of confident but absolutely useless tinkering, he finally admitted defeat when someone gently informed him that nothing here involved fuel, spark, or anything he understood, marking the moment he met his technological limit. 11. A mall parking garage witnessed peak American improvisation when one driver, desperate for a charge, attempted to use a portable gas generator to power their EV, parking directly beside a no idling sign while coaxing the generator to life like a backwoods chainsaw, filling the concrete structure with fumes, as confused shoppers tried to decide whether this was innovation or a cry for help. And after almost an hour, the generator sputtered, shook violently, and delivered precisely enough electricity to increase the car's range from 31 miles to 34, prompting the driver to proudly declare the experiment a success, even as security escorted them out for turning level 2, charging into a carbon-powered circus act, highlighting the American instinct to use gasoline to fix everything, including escaping gasoline. 12. A software engineer, confident in their tech superiority, manually updated their EV's charging firmware using a beta file from a forum that looked sketchy enough to belong in a digital alleyway, and after installing it, proudly announced they had unlocked faster charging, only to discover the update disabled the charger handshake entirely, causing the car to reject every cable like a picky toddler refusing vegetables. And for the next 3 hours, the engineer sat in the parking lot hunched over a laptop running diagnostics while muttering about corrupt packets, eventually surrendering and calling roadside assistance, who politely explained that self-installing mystery firmware was roughly equivalent to performing your own brain surgery using YouTube comments, proving that intelligence and wisdom frequently travel on separate networks. 13. A woman in an office complex caused a lunchtime spectacle when she realized her EV was charging too slowly and decided the solution was to help the cable stay snug, which she accomplished by sitting on the charging handle like she was protecting a fragile egg, holding the connector with both hands while glaring at anyone who looked her way. And when the charger inevitably paused due to improper contact, she slapped the side of the pedestal like a malfunctioning vending machine, somehow believing intimidation was a viable electrical protocol. And after 20 minutes of heated negotiations with the charger, she stormed off, declaring the station emotionally unstable, as though the equipment had sabotaged her career goals. 14. A driver attempting to stretch their remaining 3 miles of range to reach a charger decided the best strategy was to turn off everything: heat, lights, radio, dignity, and whisper at the battery like a distressed horse trainer urging it to hold on. And by the time they reached the station, their windows were fogged, their breath visible, and their hazard lights barely flickering, only for them to discover the charger required an app update that needed Wi-Fi, which the driver attempted to steal from a nearby taco truck by standing in the cold holding their phone toward it like they were absorbing mystical tortilla energy. And this entire ballet of desperation ended only when a stranger lent them a hotspot, proving that the EV revolution sometimes runs on human pity and street food. 15. A beachside tourist created a multi-state-level fiasco by attempting to charge their EV at an outlet clearly labeled "for golf carts only," then complaining loudly when the breaker tripped and shut down power to half the beachfront kiosks, resulting in angry souvenir vendors blaming the outage on inflation, sunspots, and coastal erosion, while the tourist argued that electricity is electricity, a phrase that should legally require a training course before being spoken aloud. And as maintenance workers scrambled to restore power, the tourist tried to leave, but discovered the car had gained only 2% battery, which was exactly enough to make them stay for an additional 2 hours of awkward loitering while locals glared with the intensity of a lighthouse, perfectly illustrating how one charging fail can unite an entire community in mutual resentment. 16. A blissfully confident commuter attempted a fast getaway charge, which is apparently a technique where someone plugs into a DC fast charger and immediately floors the accelerator because they believe the car could charge while rolling, a statement so bold it deserves its own museum plaque. The car lurched forward, tearing the charging handle out like a sword from a stone but with none of the dignity, leaving the cable flailing behind the vehicle as it dragged a very expensive connector across the parking lot like a reluctant dog leash, and the driver then returned, stunned, insisting the charger should have known I was leaving, as if the equipment was supposed to sense emotional distance. And by the time employees surveyed the shredded hardware, the only thing truly charged in this scenario was the damage invoice waiting to greet the driver with all the warmth of a winter sunrise. 17. A gym parking lot became the stage for a beautiful act of misplaced confidence when a newly minted EV enthusiast decided to save time by parallel parking directly beside a charging pedestal, despite the charging port being located squarely on the opposite side of the vehicle, forcing this person into a one-person interpretive dance involving the cable, the mirror, and a series of lunges more ambitious than anything happening inside the gym itself. After several minutes of what could generously be described as advanced cable yoga, the driver tried to stretch the cable across the trunk, wedging it under the spoiler like a clothesline, and when the charger refused to start, they blamed the car, the charger, the alignment of the moon, everything except the deeply obvious problem that their entire setup looked like a Gordian knot sponsored by bad planning, cementing their place in the EV history books as the Picasso of impractical geometry. 18. A shopping plaza witnessed a new genre of public theater when a driver attempted to save battery by coasting into a charger with the car fully powered off, rolling silently across the lot like an abandoned shopping cart that had developed ambition. And once they arrived, momentum spent, dignity questionable, they realized they had locked the steering wheel, leaving the car blocking 2 chargers at the angle of a confused flamingo. They then exited and attempted to push the car into a normal spot, which resulted in the vehicle inching backward, then forward, then diagonally, a sequence that resembled the world's saddest Rube Goldberg machine. And after several failed attempts, the driver loudly blamed the car for not cooperating, as though the vehicle should have understood the plan telepathically, creating a magnificent moment in which everyone around silently agreed that technology is not the issue. It's the choreography. 19. A bright sun-drenched afternoon turned philosophical when a driver approached a dead charger and attempted to revive it by tapping the screen harder and harder, escalating from polite touchscreen etiquette to what can only be described as a "why won't you love me" slap fight with the glass. while muttering that the machine must be frozen, even though it was 93 degrees outside. After exhausting the touchscreen method, the driver moved to ritual-based problem-solving, unplugging, replugging, blowing into the connector, shaking the cable like maracas, and even whispering encouragement to the charger as though coaxing a shy woodland creature into eating from their palm. And when none of this revived the station, they turned and announced to absolutely no one that this place needs better maintenance, while the real issue remained that the charger was offline, clearly labeled, and entirely uninterested in their motivational coaching career. 20. A routine weekday commute flipped into chaos the moment an EV owner discovered the charging cable was stuck in the port, which triggered an immediate meltdown involving frantic wiggling, forceful yanking, and one ill-advised attempt to leverage a reusable grocery bag as a grip-enhancing tool, transforming the scene into something between an escape room challenge and a tug-of-war with a bored robot. Eventually, the driver escalated to shouting commands at the car, including "let go" and "release," as if the vehicle understood English but was choosing emotional manipulation. And by the time a bystander pointed out the tiny unlock charge port button on the screen, the driver had already crafted a heroic narrative about mechanical betrayal, clearly ready to write a memoir about surviving a hostage situation that was, in reality, solved by pressing one small icon that had been glowing cheerfully the entire time. 21. A driver attempting to multitask turned a charging session into slapstick cinema when they decided to load groceries while plugging in, which led to a catastrophic series of events beginning with the charging handle slipping from their hand, bouncing off the bumper, and colliding with a carton of sparkling water, causing the entire case to explode like a low-budget fireworks show across the parking space. The driver then panicked, dropped the second bag, and watched helplessly as produce rolled under neighboring cars with the determination of athletes crossing a finish line. And in the midst of this grocery apocalypse, the cable became trapped beneath a runaway watermelon, which somehow both dented the charger base and achieved escape velocity, prompting the driver to announce that charging stations are unsafe, even though the only hazardous element present was their own refusal to put the groceries down for 10 seconds. 22. A tech conference parking area became a demonstration of what happens when enthusiasm outpaces comprehension after one attendee loudly bragged about understanding everything about EV infrastructure, moments before attempting to plug their car into a charger that was unmistakably a fire hydrant. The individual tugged twice on the metal cap, checked their phone for instructions, then stepped back in frustration as though the hydrant were purposely being difficult. And by the time actual EV owners noticed, the attendee had transitioned into a TED Talk-style rant about poor labeling, ignoring the massive yellow paint, the giant water signage, and the fact that nothing about the object remotely resembled a charging station, creating a scene so magnificently confident and incorrect that even the hydrant seemed to quietly judge them, accomplishing the rare feat of being schooled by an inanimate safety device. 23. A downtown charging hub turned into a lesson in unintended consequences when a driver refused to pay idle fees by obsessively sitting inside the car and monitoring the charging percentage like they were guarding state secrets, only for the HVAC system to consume enough power to slow the charging rate until the battery percentage barely crawled upward, trapping them in a self-inflicted loop where staying in the car prevented the charge from completing, which required them to stay in the car longer, which consumed more power, which prolonged the cycle until the entire situation resembled a Greek myth about a hero doomed to watch a number creep from 60 to 61 for eternity, and when the charger finally released them 2 hours later, they declared the system inefficient instead of acknowledging the very efficient air conditioner that had been fighting their progress the entire time. 24. A highway rest stop witnessed the birth of instant folklore when a driver discovered their EV was charging at half speed and decided the culprit must be dirty electricity, a phrase they said with the confidence of someone diagnosing a Victorian ghost illness, and to remedy this, they took a microfiber cloth and began wiping down the charger as though they were performing an exorcism on a countertop, carefully polishing the cable, the screen, the base, even the concrete pad beneath it, believing that somewhere in this impromptu cleaning ritual lay the key to faster charging. Unsurprisingly, the charge rate did not improve, but the driver still announced triumphantly that the charger felt better now, which was possibly the first time in history anyone has attempted to emotionally support a utility pole and then expected it to respond with improved performance. 25. A bustling grocery store parking lot achieved new levels of unintentional comedy when a driver's EV refused to lock while charging, prompting them to test the handle repeatedly by pulling it, pushing it, listening for mysterious clicks, and then escalating into a full-body effort that made them look like they were trying to break into their own vehicle on live television. After failing to crack the case, they assumed the key fob battery was dead and borrowed replacement batteries from the store, only to discover the fob worked perfectly. And after 30 more minutes of increasingly elaborate troubleshooting, with the growing emotional arc of a conspiracy documentary, they finally spotted the tiny on-screen message that read, "Press brake to lock while charging," a simple instruction that had been glowing gently for their entire meltdown, proving once again that the most advanced technology in the world cannot compete with a determined blind spot. 26. A major office complex became the birthplace of chaotic innovation when a remote working employee attempted to optimize productivity by running a full workstation out of their EV while charging, including a laptop, monitor, desk lamp, and a mini desktop fan, converting the vehicle interior into a mobile cubicle powered partly by the charger and partly by wishful thinking. Unfortunately, the constellation of plugged-in devices caused the car's systems to cycle repeatedly, turning the interior lights into a strobe pattern and interrupting charging every few minutes. Yet the employee responded not by unplugging anything but by rearranging electronics with the determination of someone optimizing feng shui rather than voltage load. And by the time the charger finally shut down entirely, the employee blamed corporate sabotage, overlooking the more obvious culprit, a car being forcibly conscripted into becoming WeWork on wheels. 27. A late-night charger encounter escalated into portable drama when a driver discovered a spider web inside the charging port and immediately refused to plug in, convinced that disturbing the web would somehow void their warranty or awaken a tiny 8-legged electrician living rent-free in the connector. Instead of brushing it away, they stood there debating ethical implications, calling it the spider's home, while their battery percentage continued to plummet like a bad stock. And after several minutes of philosophical indecision, they attempted to negotiate by waving the cable near the port to encourage the spider to relocate, a strategy doomed from inception. And when the spider finally appeared and wandered off on its own timetable, the driver celebrated as though they had resolved an international conflict, fully unaware that most people would have solved this situation with a single decisive finger flick. 28. A tourist rest stop unveiled a new definition of misplaced trust when a traveler plugged into a charger displaying 3 flashing error messages and a sticker reading "out of service," yet insisted the station simply needed a moment, and stood there arms crossed, watching the screen like a doctor monitoring a patient's vital signs, convinced that sheer optimism would override electrical faults. As minutes dragged into half an hour, they interpreted every flicker of the display as a sign of encouragement, even though the machine was clearly rebooting in panic. And when the charger finally shut down completely, the traveler declared with great authority that it must be undergoing a software update, as though the charger had chosen that exact moment to reinvent itself, proving that the human capacity for denial is both boundless and impressively patient when someone wants free electricity. 29. A residential neighborhood witnessed peak suburban drama when a homeowner attempted to charge their EV using a 100-foot extension cord snaking across the lawn, over the sidewalk, under a sprinkler, and across a flower bed like an obstacle course sponsored by Poor Judgment, insisting the whole setup was perfectly safe because the cord was outdoor rated, a term they repeated with the confidence of someone who believes rubber insulation grants immunity from all known laws of physics. Naturally, the breaker flipped within minutes, plunging half the house into darkness. And while the homeowner spent the evening diagnosing the mysterious grid failure, neighbors were left stepping over the lifeless cord like it was a crime scene perimeter, creating a perfect suburban mystery featuring a culprit who was both the detective and the mastermind. If this is the future, I'm bringing popcorn. Drop your favorite disaster in the comments, argue about the dumbest one, and sure, like and subscribe before your battery dies.